We're going to go through a few slides really quick here on bonanza farming and the New South, reapers and mechanical production. So, as we continue along, despite the industrialization of some segments of the Southern economy, a change promoted by Southern leaders who called for a New South, agriculture based on sharecropping and tenant farming, continued to be the primary economic activity in the South. So there were some really reform-minded people in the South who wanted to get away from really their main economic activity, which was agriculture, but it didn't really happen. There was not enough push for it. There was still a lot of the wide gap between the rich and the poor. And those poor tended to continue to be sharecroppers and tenant farmers. Henry Grady was a guy who he very much championed the idea of kind of the white supremacy and the white human race, but he also wanted to improve technology to get the South to be more economically competitive in the American system. And he's the reason why, if you've ever heard of Georgia Tech is a really kind of cutting edge college, at least they were, and they still rather are today, in technology. And he was the one who essentially helped bring Georgia Tech about. Textile mills in the South, these, you see this picture of Harper's Weekly where they wanted to bring more industrialization into the South. James Duke, that's a picture of James Duke you see right there. He's the guy who Duke University in North Carolina was founded on. He essentially was a tobacco farmer. He gave a lot of money to to establish Duke University. And so Duke University, you can really kind of understand it, that was developed by tobacco money. Part of the reason was after so many crops were destroyed in the Civil War, he was able to kind of rise to the top and bring back tobacco for at least him, and that's where he gained a lot of wealth after the Civil War continued, actually. All right, so new systems of production and transportation enabled consolidations within agriculture, which, along with periods of instability, spurred a variety of responses from farmers. Improvements in mechanization helped agricultural production increase substantially and contributed to declines in food prices. Do you remember when we talked about like the Panic of 1873 and the Panic of 1893? What we see is there's going to be a great decline in food prices because there's a great increase of food production, simply because of all that new mechanization. It's kind of, if you understand even the basics of economics, of supply and demand, farmers are now able to afford some of the machines that allow for more production, but that means the price of food goes down. Well, they actually think if we keep growing more and more and selling more and more, that will give me more profit, which in all reality, it kind of did the opposite, and it sent food prices down. Reapers, if you remember the McCormick Reaper, this was a big thing that helped agriculture farming be that much more efficient. Combines are starting to come about at this time. Bonanza farming, that's a picture. We had some serious bonanza farms here in North Dakota. In fact, in the Red River Valley, those were the first real major farms, are bonanza farmings. Mayville had a bonanza farm. Have you ever heard of Grandin, North Dakota? As you travel north on I-29, Grandin is along the area. Wahpeton was a fairly big bonanza farm. Castleton, actually the whole town of Castleton was originally one big bonanza farm. And if you've ever been to Bonanzaville, I think you get the idea. A bonanza farm was a huge area that was controlled by probably one person. There was one operator, or kind of like an overseer, who managed the whole thing. Sometimes they were called the superintendent. And then there was hundreds of workers, maybe not quite hundreds, but maybe close to 800 workers. And it was just like a farming community owned by one probably individual. That really ate up a lot of farm, but it also meant that you could do some serious amount of wheat production, especially here in the north, and eventually we'll get to corn production. However, some of the methods that farmers are using, and you don't even really have to know a lot about farming. I actually know quite a bit about farming simply because my father and my mother were both farmers, as when they were younger. But dry farming is this idea. I think even if you live in North Dakota and you understand the climate of North Dakota, wind in North Dakota, and the soil in North Dakota, because we have such sparse areas of open land and such strong winds, dry farming became this kind of idea. How did I write it? Used shallow cultivation. When they would have dry summers, they would not cultivate real deeply before they planted their crops. That actually contributed later to the Dust Bowl, as we get into the 1930s, because we would only have a really shallow layer of topsoil. Well, when a strong wind blows, that layer of topsoil gets blown away. If you don't plant your crops way far down, you you're at risk of it just kind of blowing away. Well, part of the issue that they didn't want to plant the crops way far down and do like real deep cultivation. I mean, actually, we're probably talking about you should maybe cultivate about 16 inches or so, 15, 12 to 15 inches down at least. Um, that means when it rains, if you don't have good enough rains, it doesn't sink down. However, what we know is that's best for the seed. If you've ever seen poor corn in a windstorm, if corn has a good, solid, deep root, it can kind of withhold or stand up to a strong storm. What we know is seeds tend to dive down and dig down to find water, because there's more water below the soil actually than there is at the top of the soil, ironically, and those roots get stronger and stronger. Farmers didn't know that at the time, and so some of their methods of farming were probably not very evolved or efficient. Barbed wire is used, especially here in the plains. We are trying to keep our cattle in, and we're using some of these types of methods. All right, last slide. Many farmers responded to the increasing consolidation in agricultural markets and their dependence on the evolving railroad system. That's an important part, this evolving railroad system. It was always kind of the idea of farmers versus the railroad. And because the railroads were privately owned companies that always seemed to get government breaks, the farmers felt like they could never win. They were always at odds with the railroads because the railroads were so powerful. They were so like efficient. You know, a farmer could take his crop to a elevator. An elevator is going to, take it to wherever it needs to go. They think of how much, wheat, let's just say wheat, a railroad or a train can move. I mean, you get 16 cars on a train. Can you imagine how much food they can move? A farmer just can't keep up. And so the farmer wanted to have a little bit more equality. And so they started creating these more kind of cooperative organizations. And one of them even is still around today. It's called The Grange. I'm going to show this clip. It's a video of what The Grange is. It's still in existence today.
Every day across America, men and women work hard. Children are taught important lessons, and volunteers come together. The Grange is there. But there is more to us than meets the eye. We are more than the farmer. We're about improving the individual and strengthening families. We're about developing leaders of all ages and backgrounds. We're about uniting communities through grassroots action, education, and service. We are the National Grange, America's family fraternity since 1867.
Oh, and even there's the Grange. I was doing a little bit more research on kind of how the Grange is organized today. So the Grange is always, you can kind of think of it as the original farmers union. And if you've ever, if any of you hockey players, Johnny Johnny Gore's out there. If you've played at the Farmers Union, that's what it's not a union in the sense of a work union, but it's a union in the sense of a cooperative. In fact, if any of you ever went to like farmers union camp or anything, I remember I did when I was a kid. It was truly a kind of a union of farmers. They would get together. Sometimes they'd pool their money. They would come up with better solutions, and they were just kind of there for each other because they always felt that it was us versus them. And if you look at that picture, even the farmer's in the middle there, and this is called a lithograph, and he's saying like, I feed you all. And if you look around, that I fight for you all, that's the military man. I preach for you all, that's the minister. um, I plead for you all, that's like the congressman. So the farmer is saying, those are all great, like pleading for you, helping you, making laws for you. That's good, but I feed you. Like I am providing the basics for you. And trying to kind of show how really important farmers were, that they're the background or the backbone of American society. There were some Granger laws that they tried to make. They wanted to lower railroad, where lower railroad rates that were charged, and get like free rural mail. Like even the railroad was able to control how to receive your mail, and so now we actually have rural mail that's allowed to happen. But some of those Granger laws were just basic things that the farmers were trying to say, come on, just can we have a little bit here against the big bad railroad companies? Wabash versus Illinois. This is one of the things that really set farmers back. Wabash versus Illinois was all about the railroad again, and it was I think that might be on that yellow sheet that I'd given you. It kind of really hurt farmers in towns because it said that states couldn't regulate interstate commerce. Commerce that happened, trade that happened between state to state, couldn't be regulated by the state. It had to be regulated by the federal government. And farmers felt like that was going to be a blow to them and their small towns because now they just didn't really get a say. All of these alliances came out: the Southern Farmers Alliance, the National Farmers Alliance, the Colored Farmers Alliance. These were all cooperatives and organizations that farmers put together to try to ease their burdens and help one another out. All right, so that's it for the day. When you are going to be in class, we're going to talk a lot about how the Grange started a movement called the Free Silver Movement, or had a part in called the Free Silver Movement. Till we meet again, see you later.